Hello everybody, welcome back, and today we are making cobbler, one of my favorite desserts to make, and it's super easy. Hello everybody, I'm Matthew. We're the Scoops, and let's make some dessert. Now first thing we're going to do is kind of go over the ingredients real quick just to show you what it is. Again, this is really easy to make, so let's go through the ingredients real quick. We've got our sugar. We've actually got 2 cups separated. 1 cup for our mixture, 1 cup for our fruit that we're going to cook up. Got a cup and a half of flour, a stick of butter, got some salt, got some baking powder, a little bit of vanilla. I'll list all the ingredients and their measurements in the description below. And then of course you've got your fruit. You can use peaches if you want to do a peach cobbler. You can use just blackberries if you want to do a blackberry cobbler. We're mixing it up just a little bit. We're actually using blackberries and raspberries. I've done this in the past. It turns out really good. I really like it. These happened to be on sale the other day, and that's why we're doing this. The only other thing that you'll need is a cup of milk and a half a cup of water. So first thing we're going to do is get the fruit on and start cooking that up. Just pour these right into the pan here. While you're pouring them in, just kind of keep an eye to see if any of them are kind of funky. You know, sometimes you get some of these and they got some little nasty spots on them. Now, as far as how much fruit to use, it really depends on your personal preference. We actually like the fruit, so we're doing quite a bit here. Each one of these containers is about 6 ounces. And so I've got 12 ounces of raspberry and 12 ounces of blackberry that I'm using. That might be a little much, but for what we're doing, it works. The next thing we add is our cup of sugar, and you can just kind of spread this all over in here. Just kind of pour it all over the place. And then our water. Depending on how much fruit you're using, will kind of depend on how much water you're using. For this, I'm using about a cup. We're not trying to boil it. We're just trying to heat it up, get all the sugar to kind of melt and mix in and soak into our fruit here. So we'll go ahead, turn this on to like a medium-high heat. Give it a good stir just to make sure all the sugar's good and mixed up in here. Again, we're not necessarily trying to boil it. It's more of a simmer. And then I just put a lid on it, and we'll come back to this a little bit later. Our next thing is actually going to be melting our butter in the pan. Now what I do for this, because we need to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. So what I do is I just take a stick of butter. This is half a cup. I'm going to take the wrapper off. I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to put it into the oven, turn it on, and as it's preheating, this is going to melt, which is exactly what we're wanting. And that gives us a little bit of time to mix up our batter. Now comes the last part, which is mixing up our batter. Now, if you've ever made pancake batter before, or any kind of batter like that, that's kind of the consistency that we're going to be looking for right here. All right, so we have our flour in our bowl. We're going to go ahead, let's mix in our cup of sugar. We're going to add our baking powder and our salt. Now real quick here, if you are using self-rising flour, you do not need to add the baking powder and the salt. This is only because I'm not using self-rising flour. Now that we've got our dry ingredients in here, let's just mix this up really well. All right, that looks pretty good to me. Now let's add the milk. And again, we're going for that batter type consistency. So if it turns out to be a little too thick, you can always add a little bit more water, which I think we're going to, or milk, which I think we're going to be just fine here. Again, make sure to give it a good mixing. This is the consistency that we're going for here. See how it just kind of pours right off that? It's kind of thick, but it's not a dough. It's a batter. Now this last step, again, is personal preference. You can try it without it. I like adding it, and that's just a little bit of pure vanilla extract. Make sure to mix that up really well. Again, check your consistency. If you need a little extra milk, add a tiny bit. If it happens to be too thick or too watery for your liking, you can always add just a little bit of flour, but in this case, looks like we're just fine. So let's check on our fruit. All right, I don't know if you can see it through this, but I can tell it's bubbling up just a bit. I've got it turned down to about medium now. And again, we just want this to more of a simmer. So I'm going to give this a stir. I can feel some of the sugars kind of caked up a little bit here. I want to make sure that's all good and mixed in. The other thing about stirring is making sure that, of course, you're not burning it. And just give it a good, simple stir. You can kind of get the feel of it. This is not going to thicken up a whole lot. Most of that will happen during the baking process, which will take place in the oven a little bit later. All right, so at this point, our oven is actually preheated, but the butter is not completely melted yet, and you want that completely melted before you take that out. That being said, when you take this out, you need to be very, very careful with it, because all of that butter has been melted and is in the bottom of this pan that has been preheated to 350 degrees. It's going to be very hot, so please be very careful when you're taking it out and putting it onto your counter space. All right, so all of our butter is melted. Like I said, this is very hot. So now what we do is we take our batter. We're just going to pour it in there gently. We're not wanting to splash it all over the place. So just kind of start pouring it in, and we're just pouring it right on top of that butter. What you do not want to do right here is mix it in. You just pour where you need more batter. It will kind of level itself out. Now next is the fruit. Again, keep in mind, this fruit is very hot. What we're going to be doing here is scooping it in. And what we're trying to do is just lay the fruit and the juices right on top again. We're not trying to mix this up. We're just kind of creating layers here. What's going to happen as it bakes is all this is going to rise up through the fruit and create this cobbler. Now, as far as how much fruit versus juices you put in, I'm going to try to put in all the fruit, obviously. But as far as the juices, again, that's personal preference. I like mine a little on the juicier side, so I try to get a good amount of it. We're just going to start scooping this on in here. And just kind of lay it down on top there, just like that. We're going to keep going until we've got it all in there, or at least as much as we want. And see how I'm just kind of gently throwing it right on top there. All right, I think this ought to do it here. So now, let's get this in the oven, which is already preheated to 350 degrees. That's how we melted our butter. And we're going to let it bake anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes. My magic number seems to be about 35. So let's get this in there, and we'll check on this in about 35 minutes. Be careful, this is still very hot, very hot. So we gotta let this cool down for a little bit. But while it's cooling down, one thing I like to do is take a little bit of just raw cane sugar, just this raw cane sugar here, and just sprinkle it around on top. Not tons of it, just a little bit. Kind of gives it a little extra aesthetic and sweetens it up just a little bit, as though this didn't have enough sugar in it already. Now again, we need to make sure to let this cool. I don't know if you can still hear the popping. This is super hot. You can't eat it yet. Otherwise, you will ruin your day. It is basically lava at this point. So let it cool before eating, and that's it. And there you have it. We got ourselves a blackberry raspberry cobbler. I hope that all of you have a chance to try this recipe out. If you do, drop a comment down below. Let us know what you think. Otherwise, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one.